Welcome to the Silicon Slopes podcast. Today we're here with Mickell Jimenez and Brian Benard, who are partners at Holland and Hart. How are you guys?
Great. How are you?
Very good, thank you. We've had a delightful conversation already. We should have pressed record before then, but let's start with what is Holland and Hart, and then we'll jump into the session for this podcast.
All right. I get the boring question at the start. Holland and Hart, full service law firm based in Salt Lake and Denver, all the way through region, mountain region here. We do everything, soup to nuts for all clients. We do a bunch with the tech sector and at Silicon Slopes. We love doing that. Mickell and I lead the labor and employment group with a few other partners of ours, and so we counsel employers on everything, from hiring, discipline, terminations, and then litigation as well when that pops up. So full service, love working with our Silicon Slopes clients. So we love being down here. Thanks for having us.
You bet. And you guys were talking that you went to law school together at the U, and that the office here has grown quite a bit, right? So you guys have 500 attorneys between the various offices, is that correct?
Yeah. We started, and then when I came back from California in 2001, there were 8 lawyers in our office in Salt Lake, and now we're at about 100 lawyers in Salt Lake.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I assume the reason for that growth is that there's just overall general growth and they need full service law firms.
I feel like we've grown up as Silicon Slopes has grown up. It's been kind of cool to see as the whole business market and industry has improved, the need for us has actually improved as well.
Yeah, very cool. All right, we're going to talk about a few things, but we're going to talk about an acronym, DEI. Kel, what is that?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes. And so there's a lot that goes into that, right? And there's been a lot of chatter over the last 10 years, 5 years, and it kind of ebbs and flows. But we're going to have a conversation on why it's important and ultimately like what you guys see in your day-to-day in interacting with customers, prospective customers. So let's just start with kind of the basics of why it is important in the Silicon Slopes ecosystem to address it and have plans around DEI.
I can start with that. It is important for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, because it's the right thing to do, and also because it makes good business sense. We, here in Silicon Slopes, we have a unique challenge because the tech industry tends to be a little more diverse already, at least in other geographic areas. But in Utah, we have a little bit less diversity just in our general population. And so bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion specifically to the tech industry, but to all industries, is really important to help a company reflect what's going on in the world and then be able to recruit and retain the very best talent that they can from around the world. Many times, particularly in the tech industry, when you are recruiting, you're recruiting from outside of the state, and you want to be able to give these very high qualified individuals a good reason to pull up stakes and put down roots in Utah, where they will be able to allow people to have the opportunity to know that not only are they coming to a diverse workplace, but their families are also going to be able to find diversity and community where they're moving. So I would say for those two main reasons, it's really important.
Yeah. So the D&I, diversity and inclusion, it's kind of the acronym for a while, but now we have the equity piece. And let's talk about that. What does that mean in this, in this phrase, equity versus just, diversity and inclusion?
Well, I think equity really looks at sort of the pay structures, right? And unfortunately, Utah gets graded very, very low in that regard. The gender pay gap, we're at the bottom. Study came out last week. We're at 50 out of 50 states in the gender pay inequity. And so equity really looks at, are we treating all candidates, male, female, regardless of their background and whether they are diverse or not, are we paying people the same pay for the same job? And that's really where the equity is at. Are we giving the same opportunities to everyone? Diversity is sort of including, higher numbers, right? It's a diverse population. Equity is, are we treating people the same? And inclusion is more, once people, they're at the dance, but are we asking them to dance?
Gotcha.
Are we including them in pitches? Are we including them in strategic planning? That's kind of a thumbnail sketch of the DE&I spectrum.
Okay. So all things being equal, like it's a frothy market in fast food, lawyering, engineering, product development. So people are getting paid a little bit more than what they used to, right? And some are getting paid more than they probably should. They're just lucky at the right time and right place. So all things being equal, there still is, if you end up 50 on 50, what's the reason if you find yourself with that ranking? What are some of the drivers of that?
As far as if you're not gaining progress?
Yeah. So like if we're on the bottom of the list,
yeah.
Is it because they're paying too much for key employees and then it skews the rest? Or is it just actually like, we're not going to pay the same?
Yeah, I think there's some of both. I think there is some paternalistic tendencies in, younger markets, right? Utah's market has expanded and transformed in the last 20 years. We don't have the history, the built up of trying to address the issue. And so sometimes we come to it with a paternalistic view of, men are more qualified for this or that. And so eliminating that is part of it. But also, I think one of the critical things that happens is because it's a hot market, we're competing for talent, we're interviewing people and saying, what are you making right now? What do I need to pay you to get you here? And so as we're competing that way, there's already an equity in the pay.
Yeah.
And so if we're telling that to a male candidate and he's at X, all right, we're going to play X plus 5 and we're going to get you. And if we're talking to a female candidate and she's at Y and she's already 10,000 less than the male, same job, same position, but we only have to pay Y plus 5, we've now brought gender pay inequity into our company just because the market already was. So we kind of have to be careful with that. And it's tough, right? Because that's our natural way of recruiting, right? What are you getting paid? What's it going to take to get you here?
Yeah.
Well, we need to be careful in that regard of once they're in our system, making sure we're starting to pay same pay for same job. So it's no one's fault necessarily. That's just the way recruiting has always happened. So we need to step back and look at, all right, what is our pay scale? Why are we paying this person more than this person? And just be mindful of it. I think we just go along, we're hard charging, and we don't think about it. We need to think about it.
Yeah, and I would add there's a retention piece to that as well. So when we know now from the pandemic that remote work is not only possible, but it can be highly efficient and productive. And many women in the workforce knew that long before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. But what happens is when you have a more, as Bryan correctly noted, a more paternalistic view of the workforce, a more traditional view of the workforce, there's often a lack of flexibility to be able to accommodate the fact that and this can be either parent, but traditionally, and in particular in Utah, as a woman is advancing in her career and as a woman is advancing in her life, she may very well and often will be faced with having to juggle and balance to the greatest extent possible this career and home life. And one of the ways that women are highly successful at that is being able to choose when they're going to get their work done. Mm-hmm. And women always rise to the occasion, always get their work done and do it very well. But if you are told you can only do work in an office sitting behind a desk between the hours of 8 and 5, that becomes a problem when something's got to give.
Yeah.
And so there's this retention problem where we get people in the pipeline, we get women, we get diverse individuals into the pipeline, we get them started climbing the ladder, and then it's impossible for them to get to the higher echelons of the ladder, and so they end up leaving the workforce. And one of the things that I think the tech industry and all industries need to look at, because it is such a highly competitive marketplace with employees right now, is You have got to be more flexible in the way you allow your employees to do their work so that you can retain these individuals that you worked so hard to get in the pipeline, that you put so many, company dollars into training and recruiting and building out to be a part of the fabric of the company. You don't want to lose that investment just because you're unwilling to be flexible in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting time, and I'm sure there will be a lot of case studies and books written about it. And I think it's great for mostly women, right? At least in our ecosystem, but plenty of males as well. But there's still this is an important meeting, and I'm on a school run, right? So there's still not like that silver bullet, whoever it is on the school run. I've been there. I'm like, ugh, I can't talk about your day at school because I'm on this important meeting, and the shrieking won't be appreciated. I think everyone's patient, and they're fine with background noise and all of that. But I also have found that I don't pay as much attention if I'm doing two things at once. So I agree, women do rise to the top way easier than, at least on our team, with remote work. They're able to juggle it a lot better. And hopefully, to your point, they don't have to go to a new spot and kind of start over, right?
And that sort of facilitates or perpetuates the pay inequities too, because women will often leave a good paying job for a lesser paying job where they can get more flexibility.
Yeah.
And so then it perpetuates this pay inequity.
Yeah. And then you end up with a low ranking.
Yes.
Right.
And there really wasn't even any maliciousness to it. It was just,
right. That's right.
And then it compounds this bad stereotype out in the universe about Utah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you see it with the Jazz players, right? How many years have we looked at, who would ever want to go play in Utah?
Yeah.
Right? And we are still trying to overcome that. And it's not any different in the legal market or the tech market, right? We have those same stereotypes of why would you ever go to Utah?
Right.
And because it perpetuates and compounds unfairly some of these stereotypes. And so we're always fighting against that. And so I think we need to be careful and strategic in changing some of this framework.
Yeah.
So that we truly are a more diverse and inclusive environment, and people feel that. That's what's going to change the stereotype.
Yeah. And so in various drivers of business, you have sales and marketing, and a lot of them are pretty easy to track and follow. If you're rolling out a diversity and equity inclusion program, whether through hiring a person to do that or you're just doing it as a small startup, you don't have an actual officer, there is benefits to it, right? That eventually you can probably trace to the bottom line. But a lot of it's anecdotal, right? Like, I felt comfortable here. Looks like you guys have a great company, great culture. I'm going to move from Kansas City to Utah. Because we already know all the other reasons they would. Good job, good ecosystem, pretty cheap, not as much as it used to be, mountains, all of that, right? But if then that person sells the heck out of a product or develops the heck out of a product, then that is bottom line. You can see that, right? So how are companies, because this is what you guys do, right? Like, you help with that. How are companies implementing, whether it's formal, informal, really robust, kind of back of the envelope? How are companies doing it successfully to where they can see an ROI?
So I think you're exactly right. There is a wide range of ways that you can go about implementing a robust DEI program. I think on the low end of that, you might have a written policy that you bring your employees together once a year and do a 1-hour training and reaffirm that we believe in this, but not much else happens throughout the year.
Yeah.
Those tend to have the least success, but I would say that's better than nothing. Right?
Yep.
On the high end of that, and where we see the most success, is when you create a department just like any other department, like your information technology department, your sales department, your HR department, whatever it may be. And that department is set up for a success like any other department. You have an officer, a chief diversity officer. There are dollars allocated in the budget to set that program up for success. It has its own set of written policies and procedures. There's lots of training. Bryan and I have had, I'd say in the last 2 years, more training than we have maybe in our, 45 years combined practice of going in and doing targeted training for the C-suite so that we have top-down buy-in, and then we go in and train managers, and then we go in and train the rank and file employees to help them understand, here's why we're implementing a DEI program. Here's why that's important. And that runs the gamut from all of the sort of soft reasons. It's important. It's the right thing to do. We need to recognize that we're a global economy. To the hard reasons, there's a lot of data coming out now that having a diverse workforce, having a diverse C-suite, having diverse people on your team, you get the very best ideas. And those best ideas rise to the top. And that means you're going to roll out a better product. You're going to have a better sales training team. You're going to have better customer outreach. And that is going to increase your bottom line. And it's taken time for that data to come out because it's a newer concept that we're all coming to understand. But on this side of the spectrum, on the far side of the spectrum, you would treat that department like you would any other department that you want to set up for success. And then there's a lot in between you can do depending on and recognizing that not all businesses have the same budgets for that. Not all businesses have hundreds of employees that may or may not be interested in that, but you can really tailor to meet your business purpose, to meet the demographic of your employees, and see what works well for your company. But I think the best way to do that is whatever route you commit to commit to it for the long term and really create like 5-year objectives and 3-year objectives. And what are we going to do this year to reach our 5-year goals so that it has longevity and we're not just paying lip service to it.
I think we're seeing a lot of this in between, which is, companies have come out with these statements or values, and then they create a committee, right? Not a department, it's a committee. And it's sort of this, where does it fit? What does it do? And a lot of times it's, okay, Mickell's interested in DE&I, so Mickell, go with a committee, create a committee and do parties or do initiatives or there's not a plan. And what we've noticed is that is well-intentioned, but can really create problems if you're not framing it the right way, if you're not empowering it with anything other than let's just get together and all of the people of color in our, at our company go to lunch together, right? Mm-hmm. Those things, that's where it falls flat. And so we also do this training of what can you do legally, right? Because there are, mines and pitfalls to this whole DE&I aspect in recruiting and other things. But I think part of the problem is, companies take that next step from the statement to a committee without direction for that committee, or putting someone in charge of it just because they're a person of color, but they might be an engineer, and I love engineers, but they're not really the people leader qualities that we're looking for something like that. So we want to set these committees up for success. Yeah. And if it's just kind of a random, hey, you guys are all interested in it, you go ahead and do what you think is fun, that's just not going to really work. And can really lead to some disillusionment, I think. And so, being savvy about it, I love that. That's a word I steal from Mickell. You got to be savvy and smart about it because it's hard, and you can't just sort of create it through parties. You want to do more than just a committee, and you want to train that committee, and you want that committee to feel like they are having some success. On concrete things like recruiting, for example. That's probably the easiest place for companies to start and improve because there are a lot of things you can do. But just creating the committees often has fallen flat and has led to people leaving companies because they don't feel empowered. And that's the reverse of what the companies usually want.
And I think Bryan hit on something really important, and that's the training and education piece, right? Because if you arm someone with education and skills and tools about what is diversity, Why is it important to elevate traditionally marginalized members of society? Why does that matter? And why does that not threaten traditionally empowered members of society, right? Because that comes up. When you start a DEI program in the workplace, that is going to come up. Hard feelings come up. Hard conversations come up. You cannot avoid that. And it is better just to educate people about that and create spaces where it's okay to be vulnerable, to say, hey, here, I'm going to raise my hand and talk about what it feels like to be a Latina woman in the workplace. It also has to be okay to raise your hand and say, I'm nervous about being a Caucasian man in the workplace, and how do we bridge that gap? Because that gap is bridgeable. But if you don't give people that information, then you have these unintended tensions that arise. And then what Bryan was saying happens more often and than people would like to even acknowledge. You'll have people who just leave because they think this workplace isn't open and friendly to me anymore on both sides.
Yeah.
And you end up losing really good people. So education and training is really important to a good successful DEI program.
Calculated education and training, right?
Yes.
It just can't just be random. You've got to be smart about it.
Yeah. I know there's no shortage of programs over the years, right? Like this isn't a new thing, right? And some are cringeworthy, right? Like timing's way off, message is way off. And everyone hears stories of friends, acquaintances, who are like, guess what happened at work, right? And you're like, whoa, somebody got paid to do that, right? It's what you want to avoid is the eye roll or just the head shake, right? Of like, can you believe that's what they thought was the best?
Or now
idea?
it's out there. You're ever thinking of changing jobs? Don't apply here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then the irony is it cuts both ways. You've got a toothless committee that's probably disenfranchising their coworkers at the same time. Like, couldn't have a worse rollout of that. Of all of the, and again, there's a lot of systems and ways to do it. I assume there's some that are a little bit kind of sneaky, right? Like, we're not going to make a big announcement. We're just going to slowly implement things, 1,000 paper cuts. Or there's the big grandiose announcement. Everything's a nail and we're the hammer type of thing, right? Have you found any that work for, scaling companies versus bigger enterprises? Or is it kind of like a la carte, where you kind of pick and choose what works best based on timing? And again, like, if you're like in survival mode, you got to survive, right? If you're in growth mode, then you've got to think long term. But is there any really good ideas or systems that you've seen?
I really like what they call the Rooney Rule.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rooney Rule came from the NFL, where the NFL said for every open coaching position, you are going to interview at least one candidate of color.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, right? Because we're struggling to get a candidate pool that is diverse. In Utah, we struggle to get a candidate pool that is diverse. But if we just continue to hire those that we know, guess what? They're going to look and walk and talk just like us.
Mm-hmm.
And so implementing something like a Rooney Rule is scalable, right? There might, of course, there are going to be times where, your survival mode and it might not work. But even the smallest employers can say, you know what? For this management level position and above, management, VP, exec, C-suite, whatever, we are going to implement a Rooney type rule and interview at least one person of color and at least one woman for each of these open positions. That's simple.
Yeah.
And then you can tell your recruiters the same thing. Bring us at least one candidate of this. We're not, and commit to it. And we've done that as a law firm. There are like 20 law firms around the country that kind of agreed to this 5 years ago. And we started doing it, and we have seen success. Mm-hmm. In a place where, we don't have a lot of diverse candidates in the legal community. Imposing that rule actually has increased our ability to change and hire those that don't look just like us. So that's a really simple thing. And it avoids, because the flip side of that is, If you come to it and say, we are only going to hire a woman or a person of color for this VP slot, or you tell your recruiters, we are only going to hire, someone from a protected category, we call it. That's illegal,
You're
right?
buying a lawsuit.
You're buying a lawsuit. That is discrimination. But changing the candidate pool is not, because then you're just opening the door. You're getting people in that door, and then you're interviewing them and making the choice of who's the most qualified, who's the best fit, et cetera. And so, you can't tell them this is a reserved spot, right? Affirmative action.
Right.
But you can say, hey, we're going to live by this Rooney Rule, and we're only going to hire this way. And I think, to me, that's the simplest thing, and it's scalable, and it's workable, and it's fair, and it's effective.
And I know a lot of businesses want to commit to something like that, but they are nervous or they voice concerns. Well, if we do this, Mickell, we just don't think we're going to be able to find qualified, diverse candidates. We just don't think we're going to be able to have that pool you feel so optimistic that we're going to have. But the reason that I'm optimistic about it is, for 22 plus years, I've never seen a situation where there is a lack of a qualified, diverse candidate pool. You might have to target your recruiting, right? You might have to be more thoughtful about where you're conducting community outreach to create that recruiting pool. But you're never gonna fall short of having qualified candidates. And I think another piece of that too that can be scalable is the way you message to your existing employees, right? So having conversations instead of just doing the hammer and the nail approach of like, here's this DEI program and it starts on Monday and get on board or get out, right?
Right.
Or as opposed to, we might try this, but we'll see how it works. To start having those conversations, brown bag luncheons, affinity groups, just anywhere where you can start having a conversation. Again, it goes back to this education piece, and it doesn't have to be everybody sitting in a classroom for 5 hours learning about DEI, learning about implicit bias, learning about all the things that matter for why we need DEI. It can be a series of thoughtful conversations that you start having with employees so that when you decide to roll out whatever level of DEI program you're going to have in the workplace, they're not hearing about it for the first time. You've normalized the conversation. You've normalized the expectation, and you've given them information so it's not scary, so it's not secret, so it's not something unknown. And allow people to ask questions, allow people to talk, dispel rumors about the bad things that happen when you bring DEI to the workplace, because they're all rumors. The positive, the increased efficiency, the workplace satisfaction, right? Job satisfaction, retention, all those metrics go up appreciably when you have a diverse workforce.
Yeah.
But you've got to have a guided conversation.
Yeah.
These open town hall questions.
Oh, those go so bad sometimes.
They go so bad, right? You want to have it messaged, right? You want to have it thought out when you open these discussions, or it can just really go off the rails in a not a very good way.
And to your point, you were saying this isn't something new. There are lots of people, consulting firms and law firms, and Brian and I do this all the time, that you can bring in that dedicate a portion or all of their career to understanding these issues, to come in and help facilitate whatever messaging it is you want to get out to your employees. So whether that is training the handful of employees who are going to go out and be in charge of the messaging, or having a town hall that is set up for success, whatever it is you're going to do, there are so many resources that are not like over the top expensive, that are financially accessible for employers that want to roll it out in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is ever covered in all of the training and offerings and stuff, but all of the merits and virtues of it, it's also just a little bit more fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's worth a lot.
Yeah.
We've got a very robust and diverse team here, actually. And I get lectured constantly on all sorts of stuff left of Trotsky, right? And then, we have the other element, where we're talking about monster trucks and like it just makes the day a lot better, and more entertaining, and you learn a lot, right?
Right.
Age, skin color, all of that factors in a little bit, but it's just like their life experiences are much more entertaining and enlightening. So I don't know, maybe you could just monetize that one where it's like you're more productive when you're happier, and if you're in a fun workplace that keeps you on your toes, you're generally happier.
Yeah. Well, and a couple things that come to mind with that is we always suggest being over-inclusive in these DE&I efforts, right? Don't limit yourself just to what they call the protected categories of discrimination under Title VII, right? Mm-hmm. Talk about first-generation college graduates. The things that they face, they've never seen what a networking event is, right? It doesn't come from their background, right? They are underrepresented, right? Single parents, right? Financially, diverse, underrepresented, individuals that came from, something like that. Being over-inclusive, then you get the whole holistic discussions you're talking about. And so that's important, and I would say it's not only more fun and enjoyable, but I think you provide better services as a company when you do have a diverse team. And that's, I will say I've lived by that. I've been fortunate to be at a place my entire career where our group has been at least 50% women and a large segment diverse. We reflect the population much better than people that all just look like me. And I think our advice is then better and tailored better to our clients because their workforce is more similar to my group than it is to a very homogenistic situation. And so I think that helps too, right? You provide a better service because you are surrounded by people of diverse backgrounds, whatever it might be. And so you understand things better so you can relate that to your clients.
Yeah.
And address situations and problems that your clients are facing in a much better way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like free education.
Right?
Free fun. And, the thicker the skin people have, the better it is too, right? If there's a sensitive one, they're a little bit harder to deal with. But if you can have fun and have thick skin, because you can't go live in every culture. You can't, not even a billionaire could do that, right? Like there's not enough time and energy to do that, but like turns out like first generation, whether they're white, purple, brown, doesn't matter, versus somebody that their grandpa was a millionaire, their dad was a millionaire.
Silver spoon, right?
Yeah.
It's a different, you come to it innately understanding how to network almost.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've lived it. You've been your parents took you to different events your entire life and you saw how people hobnob.
Yep.
Versus someone that has really just picked themselves up out of the dust and have never once been to such an event.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes into mind with that is then they have this imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
They feel like I don't belong here. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to approach people when it's just natural to others. And look, that doesn't always come down to socioeconomic things.
Yeah.
But often it does.
Oh, for sure.
Often it does.
Absolutely. And that's like an easy thing too.
Yeah.
Like these are all just rich people. They're just the same as you and me. Go talk to them about football.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
And they'll pick it up pretty quickly. And something that simple probably would put their career on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah.
They have those soft skills.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you guys have kind of outlined here as to what your guys' role in as partners at Holland and Hart and the work that you guys do. It's a, I guess generationally, if there's baby boomers getting ready to retire, they'd have a different opinion on it versus a 19-year-old just at an internship and a couple of years away from starting out. But it's probably some topic that'll never go away completely. But it also doesn't need to be weird and combative and dramatic. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to come and explain what you guys do and what Holland and Hart's views and opinions on this subject are. And I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Happy to be here and happy to help people through it. I mean, it's a walk in the dark sometimes, but being thoughtful about it and savvy, you don't lose the message and the benefits by creating something that's dramatic and divisive. And that's where you lose it. And so it's so important to just, forge ahead, be consistent, be fair, and be good with your people, and it'll come back tenfold to you. So thanks for having us.
You bet. Thank you.